Hello and welcome to this video. This is the round recap video for round 10 of the Tata Steel tournament of 2016. Yeah, round 10 was a pretty interesting round, but as almost all of those rounds, they had a couple of not so interesting games. And I will look through all the games, but start with the less exciting ones and work my way up to the more tense encounters. So we're going to start with Giri with white against the world champion Magnus Carlsen. And yeah, this is the first game, so you already know that it's not the biggest of a thriller to expect. What did we have? We had a Queen's Gambit, and Magnus is going for Bishop b4, which is one of his main openings nowadays. He also plays the classical quite often, Bishop to e7, but the Rogozin is more often than not his choice. Yeah, Giri goes for Bishop g5, which is considered to be a little bit less testing, maybe, than taking at Bishop g5. One reason is that if you take first and go here, if black plays h6, here white actually has the option to play Bishop h4 for a sharp play after g5 and knight to e4. Yeah, white usually goes here, and we have a sharp game ahead. Yeah, white can sacrifice his pawn, leads to quite interesting play. In the game continuation after Bishop g5 and h6, white does not have the option to play Bishop h4, because after this it is believed to be that black has a good play here. It's a difference if this trade has happened or not. One difference is that in some cases here h5 can be very embarrassing. Yeah, if white now goes knight d2, to show the difference, there is also something hanging on d4. So takes was played, and now Giri played queen to b3. This is a known move. It's difficult to come up with a novelty on move 7 in the Queen's Gambit, but it was not perceived to be very dangerous, usually due to c5. This is what normally is played, and also is in the spirit of the Rogozin. Carlsen, however, went with the capture, and he took a while to play that. So it seems that he basically played this over the board. Takes, and now c6. So a very, very solid choice here by the world champion. The position that we get now after e3, and I think this all feels very logical, is this castles, Bishop d3. Yeah, white may also castle here. This looks a lot like the Lasker variation of the Queen's Gambit declined. Yeah, to show you the similarities. I'm going back a little bit. It's just interesting how sometimes similar positions can come up from different openings. This is the position here out of the Lasker defense, yeah, just to take that in. And in the game we got this position, which is very similar. Here the queen is on f6 instead of e7, and this is in fact making a bit of a difference, as here c5 was played immediately. In the Lasker, black sometimes goes like b6, bishop b7, later c5, and here c5 is playable immediately. The whole setup here is geared towards full equality, and we see that with bishop b7, the bishop here gets traded, and here you already get the feeling that not much is going to happen here. Yeah, this got traded. Yeah, takes with the g pawn to keep the c5 pawn covered, and here rook c7. Here it is pretty clear that it will end in a draw, as the whole queen side will get traded down.
Check.
Yeah, here they agree to a draw. Not a very exciting game, but yeah, it is what happens sometimes. I think Giri wanted to play something not as well analyzed, maybe with queen b3, and Magnus, he seemed to be surprised, as he took quite a while now to take on c3, but he chose a very pragmatic approach by the capture and going c6, going back basically to classical knowledge, out of this Lasker variation to trade down to complete equality. I think a good result for him, as he's leading the event, and Giri, would he have won this game, would have been really in contention. So I think Carlsen is happy with this result. The next game to check is Navara with white against Shahriar Mamedyarov. We had a Rui Lopez, and Mamedyarov is going for g6, the same line that Carlsen had played in an earlier round against Karjakin successfully. This is in fact a pretty decent line, I really think so. As I mentioned already when I made the video that featured the Karjakin-Carlsen game, my objection against this always was this d4 takes bishop g5 that I didn't like. Especially I didn't like it in terms of black playing for win, and this is what I would associate with the move g6 on a normal player level. Let's say that you want something not so well explored and so on, try to surprise your opponent. This is just not very interesting, that d4 takes bishop g5. Anyway, this is probably on that level a little bit too barren, the position, so they go for c3 mostly and play this kind of position, which I always found interesting for both sides to play. Mamedyarov here goes with h6. In the Carlsen game, Magnus played knight f6, I think, against Karjakin, after which we had d5, this bishop e3, and here he came up with that funny knight g8 move. Mamedyarov plays differently. He plays move h6, leaving himself, he's flexible now with his knights. For example, if d5 is played, this knight can go here, and then you have c5 quickly. Interesting idea. Navara plays knight bd2. That's an interesting concept. Black now can take the pawn. And e5 now. It looks very sharp, but Mamedyarov, I think, defends in a fine fashion. Knight g7. Black goes for development. Note that white is not so well developed. This whole knight bd2 and so on, it's all a little bit slow. Took here, castles. And now white tries to exploit that square on f6. He goes knight to e4.
Check.
And plays knight f6. And this leads to some sharp complications, but the way it went, black could even take that pawn on f6. That's quite a funny move, because first idea is to play g4 now, and black, it seems, loses a piece. However, this is a funny move. Queen to g7. Saving. Check. This is the point. Saving material for black. Black is even, of course, winning here if white would take the knight. So g4 is bad, but white can take on h6 using the same pin. And the resulting position after all those trades here is just completely equal.
Check.
We had a rook endgame ultimately.
Check.
With equal pawns, that was agreed to a draw. So, some brief excitement out of the opening here, but ultimately not that much happening. The next game we need to check, because we check all the games, and I want to give a full overview what happened. It's the game Wesley So with white against Evgeny Tomashevsky. So is going back to 1c4, what he had played earlier to beat Giri. He's mixing c4 and e4 in this event. And Tomashevsky plays the e5, classical stuff, and after g3 plays the move knight to d4. This is an interesting line that I like to recommend to players that look for something to play against 1c4 based on e5. If you want something simple to play, that's a good line. It's much easier to learn than, let's say, d5 here or bishop to b4. as after knight d4, white's choice is limited. Taking on e5 is a very risky business after queen to e7. Yeah, white of course cannot
Checkmate.
go back and has to play something very uncomfortable like f4 here, like this, and black's position is pretty nice. So they all play bishop g2 here, after which black takes and now develops. I know that looks like 1, 2, 3, like a loss of tempo, but in the meantime white also has moved with his bishop again, and if we just look at the position without counting any tempi, we see that both sides have 2 minor pieces developed. It should be completely fine. And black is not unhappy about that trade, as often he has this option of playing c6, d6, pretty similar to some kind of Italian game. Yeah, and in the game we saw this interesting maneuver, bishop coming to d6, but it was back in the game quite quickly, or let's say back to a position where it is not obstructing anything. It is quite funny that after takes, c takes, and Tomashevsky playing c5, we now get something that looks like a Benoni. But it is a Benoni that is pretty comfortable for black, because they're already all knights traded, and piece trades favor black in the Benoni, because black has a little bit less space, and this means that trading helps. Second thing is, quite often in the Benoni, your issue with black is that white plays like e4, f4, e5, break through in the center, maybe at the end leading to some kind of kingside attack. And this is also not happening after the trade. So black can be happy there. I think he has equalized quite comfortably. Yeah, we had this interesting maneuver, rook d3, e3, but ultimately that only led to trades. Yeah, black has no problems whatsoever. Black would like to push his pawns, but with that maneuver, so has prevented that, and very wisely so. If they would have put the bishop back like on g2, it would be very passive. And here I think white holds the balance comfortably. And a couple of more trades, but this rook ending just leads to mass simplifications, and here they agreed to a draw. Not a very exciting game, but a very correct game by two basically very solid players. As mentioned, that is an interesting line to play for black if you want something simple in the c4 e5 complex. The next game I'm going to check is Ding Liren with white against Luke van Wely, and they went for a Grunfeld. Yeah, Ding is playing the Russian variation with queen b3, as he did earlier in the event against Wei Yi. This seems to be his main weapon against the Grunfeld. Okay, knight a6 by Van Wely. This is called the Prince variation, not like Prince the musician from the 80s, but it's P-R-I-N-S, Lodewijk Prince, a Dutch player and master who has invented this line in the 50s or 60s, been a while. And it has been a main line of the queen b3 variation for quite a while. Kasparov was his main practitioner in the 80s and 90s, even against Karpov in world championship matches. Okay, black is going c5. That's the idea of knight a6, and this kind of structure with white's d-pawn being advanced is the typical picture of the knight a6 line. The interesting thing is that after some rather normal looking moves here, queen b6, technically a novelty, but it looks completely normal, that the next couple of moves already land Ding into deep trouble. He plays the move b3, which is still seems to be okay, even though it's not quite so clear what it does. It covers the b-pawn. Maybe this is the simple explanation. But the move after rook e8 here, the move knight d2, This seems to be leading into trouble. Yeah, white had a couple of options, for example, rook d1, a couple of moves that are possible. But this seems to lead to trouble. And we see quickly what happens. When Wely plays the move knight d7, it took him a long time in the opening. But we now see the issue. The knights here are both geared towards the d3 square. And white's queen does not have many squares. It is a common problem in the Russian variation here. Yeah, what's white supposed to do? Maybe rook a to d1. What Ding played, rook c1, and played rather quickly, leads to deep trouble, really deep trouble. When Wely plays this move, and this leads to a pretty clear edge for black, even though it seems that the move knight b4 was even stronger. The intention is to just put the knight on d3. If we just look at a3, which is very cooperative, but just to show the idea, black will jump here, and after takes, for example, there's knight e5, and black is in fantastic shape. The whole position is really bad. Knight b4 is probably even stronger than Wely's move, even though he has a pretty clear advantage here as well. Yeah, rook d1. Yeah, if white takes, black takes, something like this. This is also very awful. The knight on a4 is totally misplaced, and white's coordination is very, very bad. Yeah, there are threats like, simple threats like attacking this queen, and then the rook will get the bishop here. Yeah, it's no fun. This is what he did, rook fd1. And again, here Van Wely could have cashed in if he sorry, after this actually, knight b4, knight f3. Here, he could have cashed in on c3. There is no clear reason why he didn't do that. It wins an exchange, and probably that's the way to play. Yeah, whatever the rook does, it will always be taken. Something like this, for example, black can take and play, I don't know, queen to f6 or something like that. Yeah, I know this is hanging, and there are some unclear spots in this line, but still, it's an exchange, and probably what he should have done. What he did is also giving a clear edge. We should be clear on that. He gave the exchange and got it right back. So black won a pawn with a very good position. Instead of taking on c1, the engine also gives the move queen to f6, which is very strong, even though, yeah, taking the exchange is fine. There is nothing wrong with that. So we should not make the mistake of believing that you have to play or should play 100% perfectly, especially under time pressure. It is important to keep the advantage. It's not about some digits there. Okay, I think what Van Wely did is fine. Yeah, he kept his pawn, was active, everything is good. He now activated his knight. And here we get to a critical situation. He now takes on f3 here, and this is indeed a mysterious move. They both were down to roughly 5 minutes, and of course, as I said, you cannot expect perfect play, but the move knight b to d3 was, I think, reasonably easy to find. The idea is that it doesn't really matter if white takes or not, but here the thing, the queen is attacked, it will move, and then the move g4, and if the knight moves, there is knight f2 winning the rook. And this is it's a complete win for black. White can actually resign here. He will lose the house. So that was a very convincing way to win for Van Wely that he did not take. Really surprising. It wasn't difficult. Okay, he took on f3, and now this was taken. And well, if we count, it's equal material, and black is maybe still somewhat active, but the d-pawn, things are completely unclear now. In the further course of the game, there were some advantages here and there, but I don't want to get to analyze it move by move. The way it happened, actually, White was able to sacrifice the queen for a ton of material. Yeah, here.
Check.
Takes, and here. And now the d pawn gets to be very dangerous. In fact, with very little time on the clock, Wely played queen c3, allowing knight f1, and now the d pawn can only be stopped by a sacrifice. And here in this position, of course, black has to fight for a draw. I was, to be honest, the next part of the game, and it lasts more than 20 moves, I only checked somewhat superficially, but I think that there was no clear way to win for Ding. Yeah, it's now only White who can do something, but I don't think there was anything substantial that he could have tried. In fact, I think it's a pretty good job by Wely that he didn't lose the game, because he had a completely winning position, and the worst part is he was certainly completely aware that he was totally winning, and he had spoiled it. And very often, if you spoil your win, yeah, you don't spoil it just to a draw, but to a loss. Yeah, often in steps. Yeah, first you get it back to a draw, like and then you lose. Yeah, and he manages to not lose this game. He got the h-pawn up the board and now has this counterplay. Here they agreed to a draw already, because White has no way to deal with that h-pawn. He can only block it, yeah, with some bishop on the long diagonal. Like, I think this should work, yeah. And bishop and rook, yeah, make sure that the h-pawn is not promoting. Same time, there is no way forward for any side. So a draw in this game, a bit of a disappointment certainly for Wely, who had a win at one point, but easily after he made a mistake himself, could have gotten into trouble and lost here, but he didn't. Okay, the next game to check is Hou Yifan with White against Eljanov. We get the Italian game. It's just getting Juco Piano, which seems to be getting more and more popular in this event. We already saw it a number of times. And Eljanov is the first player here who goes for the setup that I'm actually playing against the Italian. And yeah, with a6 and bishop to e6. I usually play bishop a7 a little bit earlier on. He does that later. But I think that this setup is very, very decent for black. Yeah, Hou Yifan went bishop c2, not trading. Always an interesting question. Should White trade that bishop or keep it on the board? The two versions. Yeah, White can trade herself here or let black take. Not sure. Yeah, of course, you can always do something like that and allow the capture on b3. Black, however, has a number of useful moves like bishop a7, a6, and so on. I think that after bishop c2, that keeps more pieces on the board and is maybe the more fighting move in a way. But still, I believe that black is very fine, because he, as we see in the game, h6, rook e8, in d5. He gets in d5. And the rule of thumb is, if you can get in d5, in an opening like the Italian game or the Rue Lopez in most e4, e5 structures, if you can get in d5 without getting immediately punished tactically, or your center gets weak or something like that, if you can get it in without any big issues, then you're normally fine. And this, I think, applies here as well. I think black should be about equal here. Yeah, White pushed on the queen side. That's an interesting idea, but it got stopped with b5, so further expansion is more difficult now. This is a position that has been seen before in tournament practice in a Grandmaster game from Biel 2015, in an open event, not in the Master tournament. Knight e4 was played. Very logical looking move, however also a pretty dry move. After something like this, it looks very drawish. Yeah, Hou Yifan went bishop b2. Looking a bit strange, but she wants to have this d4 move as a possibility later. Yeah, queen to b8. Rerouting the queen. And now centralizing. Yeah, white took the bishop pair, and now knight h4. Yeah, this is an interesting position that I think is roughly equal still. However, a couple of moves later, we come to a critical position. Yeah, black is trying to get some counterplay here against f2. Queen to h5. Queen c8. Yeah, and in this position, white has a number of moves. Knight f5 is an interesting option. Bishop f5 is interesting. The move that is questionable, however, is what Hou Yifan played. She went for bishop to e4. And this leads to trouble. It really leads to trouble. After knight f4, the queen is attacked, and it doesn't have a very good square. Don't forget that the deep 4 pawn is also hanging. Yeah, there's quite some pressure on it. Yeah, she went to f3, and after this move now, Eljanov could have gotten a very, very clear advantage by taking on d4. That's a nice tactic after the bishop capture here. Knight takes, queen takes, and knight d3. And this is absolutely devastating. f2 is attacked once, twice, 3 times. e1 is hanging. There's bishop d4 as a threat. Tons of threats. Yeah, white is in huge trouble here. The computer gives a win already. Yeah? So this was a big possibility now for Eljanov taking on d4. He played knight g6, however, a move that also looks very attractive, but is not as strong. After this, he takes bishop f3. Black is a pawn up, but is not winning immediately. The position still is reasonably complicated, and with both sides getting low on time, in fact, Hou Yifan again gets a chance to get a decent game. And this is after bishop d4. Here she could have taken on f5 and taken on b5. Here white is totally fine. After bishop takes, here bishop c6, for example, is, if anybody, white is better. That was a chance for her. But she didn't play that. After bishop d4 she took, and now took on d3. Also very logical looking continuation.
Check.
Knight e2 check. Aha. Rook takes. Yeah, we have to check. Queen takes, gives away this. And bishop takes, queen is hanging. So rook takes d3. And this is a critical moment. Now, Hou Yifan could have basically ended the game by queen takes f5 and ending it in a draw. Rook has to take, takes on b5. And now black has to be very, very careful to not give the a pawn too much scope. Here the a pawn will be very, very dangerous. So, I'm sorry, that was a bit too much. After this, black has to take with the rook. And now rook e8 check, king g7, bishop e2 gets the exchange back with a completely equal position. So this was Hou Yifan's opportunity to equalize the game. However, as I said, they were both in very serious time pressure, and she at the end gave the check and played this.
Check.
After which the check and another check kept the material for black. Now Eljanov is completely winning, and even though he made some mistakes later and did not find the most forcing win, it was never completely in doubt. Yeah, she continued to fight, but at the end Eljanov managed to convert this position. One key idea is to get rid of the pawns here. And he found a nice way of doing that. This was one. And this is an interesting move. Yeah, now the c pawn is running. So white has to basically take en passant, after which the a pawn gets liquidated, and now black can always operate with this idea of returning the exchange at the right moment to get a completely winning king and pawn ending. So a win for Eljanov, a loss for Hou Yifan. She had her chances in this game, at least to make a draw, but ultimately lost the game. Yeah, I think she had an excellent start to the event, but now maybe is showing some signs of, yeah, I don't know if fatigue is the right word, but it's just probably very difficult playing such a super high level event if you are not used to this kind of opposition on a daily basis. She has played those top players before, of course, but doing that, yeah, day after day after day is probably extremely exhausting. Okay, so the next game to check is Karjakin with white against Mickey Adams. And again, I'm happy to say that Adams is playing one of my openings. So I'm always happy to see setups that I think are good, and if they are played by top players, it's kind of a nice confirmation that I was thinking I was on the right track. Okay, Karjakin is playing the London system, which is getting really popular nowadays, and Adams goes for this setup. Yeah, this is a very sound, solid, classical setup against the London that I think is a very good choice if you like those kind of central-based approaches. It is not something that I had recommended in an early video series of mine a couple of years ago. I made a video series on how to battle the London system. In this series, I did not mention this setup, I believe, but it is very, as I said, very much recommended. The idea is that if white now takes on d6 and black takes, black will very likely get an e5, and this is of course completely fine for black. White can also go back to g3. This is what Karjakin did. Yeah, and black castles, bishop d3, b6. Yeah, black is going for the queenside fianchetto. Here knight e5 was played, and this is also the main continuation there for white. The idea is that after bishop to b7, white is going f4 and switches this to a kind of stone wall. It's an interesting form of stone wall because the bishop that usually is sitting on c1 is now on g3 and sometimes can get to h4 to pin, or otherwise be involved, let's say, more than from c1. Black's idea is this, and played here by Adams. The knight is coming over to f5, queen f3, knight to f5. Why f5? It's a good square, simply. The knight is well positioned, and after bishop f2, white is clearing the way for the g4 push. Black plays the bishop back and is now ready to put this knight on d6. And then all black pieces that have some kind of relevance for the e4 square are geared towards that. So black is ready to occupy that outpost. Karjakin played g4 now. Sharp move. Yeah. Quickly played though, and he was still within his preparation. Knight to d6 and g5. Again, played very quickly. We see that the London system is not super boring opening by default. You can play it quite ambitiously. To be honest, I'm a little bit in doubt that this is so great, this g5 stuff. Maybe white should consider to castle short here and be a little bit more conservative. One thing I'm pretty sure of, after g5, knight f to e4, and long castles, what Karjakin played after some thought, I think that this is a serious yeah, I think it's a mistake, to be honest. Black's play now is very simple. Yeah, Black will play c4, b5, b4. Just open up the queen side as quickly as possible. And I'm not sure what White's idea is. Of course, he has gained some space and has a good knight, but there is no direct way obvious how he is going to open up the position, while c4 and b5 is very, very straightforward. Yeah, Adams went c4. Yeah, don't be irritated by the clock. He didn't spend that long. he spent quite some time, but the clock will jump back to something more logical. Yeah, as I say, Black's pawns start rolling, and White is not having a clear idea what to do. He went queen h3. Yeah, Black cannot take here, of course, his mate. So, getting out of this, and still, we see what Black is doing. Forward, yeah, very easy. You just, yeah, put everything against White's king, and White has no play. He tried the capture. Adams captured as well, of course. Bishop e1, and now bishop d5. Yeah, the thing is, if White takes here, Black is going a5, takes, and just like giving away everything to open up. c3, bishop takes, knight b5. A line like that, for example, is terrible for White. Yeah, like here, Black has given away material, but his play is so easy. Rook c8, all pieces participate in the attack, both bishops. That's a disaster. Black is winning here. It's just a win if White captures on b4 and takes everything. Yeah, Karjakin decided to play rook g1, but this of course allows b3. It was a matter of choosing between two evils. Yeah, okay, takes, bishop b1. This is not a happy piece. Yeah, here Adams chose a somewhat conservative approach. Maybe also a little bit due to his experience in this tournament. He played the move f5, completely trying to shut down any kingside action for White. It seems that this was not strictly necessary. A move like rook c8 probably would have led to a victory just by attacking White's position and not caring so much what White may have. But still, this is not to be condemned. Black has a clear edge, and at the end managed to win a very convincing game. The knight comes to f5, and now Black just have to get the pieces near the king. Rook here, queen a1. Yeah. And, yeah, it ends here on the ICC, but in fact they made a couple of more moves. Queen b2, king a1, rook d2, and here Karjakin resigned. That's what the official side gives as moves. So the first win in this event for Mickey Adams, who really suffered a lot in this tournament. I think he was on -4, and a very heavy defeat here for Karjakin, who did not seem to be so comfortable with the d4, bishop f4 setups as other players are. We remember Carlsen's nice win against Tomashevsky. This is a good opening for Black if you want a simple recipe against the London system, and especially if you, with your first moves, are limited to a position like that with d5, e6. Sorry for that. If you're limited to that, then this is a very serious option for Black. Okay, let's have a look at the final game of this round to check. This is Caruana with White against Wei Yi. We got a Rui, and Wei Yi is playing the open variation, a line that Caruana has played earlier in the event, so they both should know something about it. Yeah, this is the long-standing main position here on move 9, where White has tried a couple of moves. The main line is knight bd2 nowadays, but the old line is c3. It's played here. Yeah, bishop e7 here by Wei Yi. Bishop c5 is also a main move. And now somewhat less common continuation by Caruana. He plays bishop c2. Knight bd2 is the more prominent move. Yeah, bishop g4 by the Chinese player, h3, and bishop h5. This was already played after a long thought. Yeah, bishop takes f3 is not really an option here. I think after takes, white seems to be in good shape. I mean, it has been tried, but I don't feel like it's a very attractive position for black. f4, or white can also play b4 first, both is possible. But I think white is better here with this better central control. The king is somewhat weak, but it's not a serious issue. Black's pieces are not really near the king. Yeah, he played bishop h5 at the end, and after g4, bishop g6, and knight d4, the position got very, very sharp. And we see that Caruana has blitzed out all this. This is a very important information. He was completely within his preparation. Very, very worrisome if you are black. Knight takes e5 is a move that can be checked here, even though after f4 probably white seems to be better. And taking on e5 against someone who obviously has studied it inside out is probably not a good idea. After this, the position feels very, very murky, but white, I think, is in good shape here, and Caruana is the one who knows that position much better than his opponent. It's just a possible line. There are also alternatives. At the end, Wei Yi played queen d7. He didn't dare to take the pawn. However, now after f4, takes, and f5, I think white can be quite happy here. He must be somewhat better because of his better central control and more space. It is not necessarily terrible for black, but white certainly has an opening advantage. Castles, knight c3. Yeah, here probably black should have taken on c3 and played this position. Maybe takes c6, something like that. White is better here, and quite he's not clearly better. It's not a substantial advantage, but it is clear that if anybody's better, it is white. Maybe this is why he didn't want to go for that. It seemed too one-sided to him. However, what he did, he played c6 immediately. This leads to a very clear advantage to white. And in fact, in more than one way. This is what Caruana played, and it is an advantage. Taking with the knight was also possible. This is looking really grim. So d takes, and now bishop b3 check. Bishop f7 maybe. And now the capture seems to be somewhat better for white after rook takes, queen b3, for example. Yeah, let's say queen to d5, rook c1. This pawn is not particularly strong. What Caruana did is taking with the bishop, and this is also a good continuation. It's debatable what's better, actually. This is again bad. So the d pawn has to take, and now he pushed d5. Now, and here black is in trouble. The engine's suggestion here is to take on d5 and go for this endgame. But this is something that a human player probably, wants to avoid at almost all costs. It is just a terribly passive position for black, where one mistake can cost you the game so quickly. Probably something like this. And just some centralizing move now. Rook to d1. Both rooks look good. e6 is also a move. Yeah, black is in trouble. But it's maybe better than what he did. He played b4. And now after d takes, the recapture on c6 leads to an even worse version of that endgame as before. Now it's on a dark square. This is why he took on d1. But now after knight takes, the position is, to be honest, winning for white. Yeah, the c pawn is very strong, and the knight is not active, but will ultimately be activated. Yeah, here rook e1 and knight f2 was maybe even clearer, but what Caruana is doing is good enough. He has both his pawns lined up, and at the end managed to convert this very comfortably. Yeah, here this was a nice little shot. Bishop takes b4. The point is that after bishop takes b4, there was rook c6, and now black cannot
Check.
take because of the promotion. He had to go here, and now f6 keeps all the material for white. He's a ton of pawns up, and after this here he resigned. So this is the first loss for the Chinese prodigy in this event on round 10, in round 10. So he survived 9 rounds with draws and 1 win, but now ultimately got beaten in a game in good style here by Caruana. I think Caruana got a good opening prep in with a good position out of the opening. He managed to put some pressure on Wei Yi, and he could not really defend this properly. Very good game here by Caruana. After 10 rounds, this means we have basically a race between 2 players who still can win the event. I mean, mathematically speaking, there are probably more, but Carlsen is leading with a +4 score. Caruana is trading this with +3, so half a point behind. And the next players are, I think, Giri is on +1 and Wesley So is on +1. There's more than one player. So it's very likely that the winner of this year's Tata Steel event will be either Magnus Carlsen or Fabiano Caruana. They have played each other, so it's not a direct duel coming up. But we'll see in the next rounds, 3 rounds left, who ultimately will win this first big important super tournament of the year. I hope you enjoyed the coverage for round 10. I'll be back, of course, for the final 3 rounds, Friday, Saturday and Sunday. Thanks for watching.